Imagine this for a moment. The world is on edge. Headlines are screaming about war. Washington is tense. Tehran is defiant. Global markets are shaking. And in the middle of all this noise, thousands of miles away, a calm but powerful voice rises in India. A speech that many are now calling historic. A speech that some believe signals a shift in global power. The question is not just what was said, but why it was said now. And more importantly, who was really listening? Welcome to the Maple Doctrine. Before we go deeper, if you care about Canada's future, global power shifts, and the real stories behind the headlines, make sure you hit like and subscribe right now. It helps this channel grow, and it tells YouTube that serious conversations like this matter. Now, let's get into it. At first glance, it looked like just another diplomatic visit, a formal podium, national flag standing tall, polite applause. But when Mark Carney began to speak in India, the tone was different. It wasn't just about trade. It wasn't just about friendship. There was something stronger underneath, something strategic. This speech happened at a time when the United States and Iran were locked in rising tension. Military analysts were debating what could happen next. Energy markets were reacting by the hour. And global leaders were choosing their words very carefully. In moments like these, every sentence matters. Every pause carries meaning. Carney's message focused on stability, cooperation, and long-term partnerships. But between the lines, many observers saw something bigger. Canada positioning itself as steady, independent, and forward-looking. Not reactive, not emotional, strategic. India, of course, is not just another country on the diplomatic map. It is one of the fastest-growing major economies in the world. It is a rising power with influence across Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. When Canada strengthens ties with India during a global crisis, it sends a signal. And signals in geopolitics are never accidental. What made this speech powerful was not loud words or dramatic attacks. It was the calm confidence. The idea that while others are focused on conflict, Canada is focused on connection. While others talk about escalation, Canada talks about stability and trade routes, energy security, economic resilience, long-term planning. For Canadian viewers watching this unfold, the bigger question becomes, what does this mean for us at home? Because foreign policy is not just about handshakes and photos. It affects jobs, fuel prices, investments, and national security. When global conflict threatens oil supply, Canadian energy suddenly becomes more important. When major powers clash, middle powers like Canada must choose carefully how they move. Too close to one side and you risk dependency. Too distant and you risk isolation. The balance is delicate. Some analysts believe this visit to India was part of a broader strategy. Diversify partnerships, reduce over-reliance on any single ally, strengthen economic ties with emerging powers. In simple terms, do not put all your eggs in one basket. For a country like Canada, heavily tied to the United States economically, even small shifts matter. But here is where things get interesting. In times of global tension, silence can speak as loudly as statements. Carney did not directly attack anyone. He did not name rivals. Yet the timing of the speech made headlines. Because when a Western leader speaks strongly about cooperation with India while Washington is focused on Iran, people notice. Is this a quiet signal of strategic independence or simply smart diplomacy? That depends on how you interpret it. On the Maple Doctrine, we look beyond surface reactions. We ask what patterns are forming. Canada has been slowly expanding its global trade relationships, talks with Asian partners, increased presence in Indo-Pacific discussions, focus on supply chain security. These are not random moves. They are pieces of a long game. And that long game is about positioning Canada in a world that is becoming more divided. The old global order, where one superpower dominated, is changing. Multiple centers of power are rising: China, India. Regional blocs in the Middle East, Europe redefining its own role. In this environment, flexibility is strength. For viewers who think geopolitics is distant from daily life, think again. When alliances shift, currencies react. When trade routes change, prices change. When partnerships expand, new industries grow. Students, entrepreneurs, investors, even everyday workers feel the ripple effects. As this story continues to unfold, the real question is whether Canada is preparing early for a multipolar world or simply reacting carefully to immediate tensions. The difference between those two approaches will shape the next decade. And we are just getting started. If you are still watching, that tells me you understand this conversation goes deeper than headlines. In the next part, we're going to break down the hidden economic angle behind this visit, what it could mean for Canadian industries, and why some voices in Washington may be paying closer attention than they publicly admit. Now, let's go deeper, because this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Speeches are never just speeches. They are signals to investors, allies, rivals, and even domestic audiences. And when Canada strengthens its voice in India at a time of global tension, the economic layer becomes impossible to ignore. India today is not the India of 20 years ago. It is a technology hub, It is a manufacturing giant in the making. It is a market of more than 1 billion people. For Canada, that represents opportunity on a massive scale: energy exports, agricultural products, clean technology partnerships, artificial intelligence collaboration, education exchanges. These are not small sectors. They are pillars of long-term growth. When global instability threatens traditional supply chains, countries start looking for reliable partners. If conflict in the Middle East disrupts oil routes, energy-importing nations look elsewhere. Canada, with its vast natural resources, suddenly becomes strategically important. But here's the key. Importance only matters if you have diversified buyers. Strengthening ties with India means Canada is expanding its customer base. That creates leverage, and leverage in geopolitics equals power. Think about it this way. For decades, Canada's economy has been deeply tied to the United States. The relationship is strong, historic, and beneficial. But heavy dependence can create vulnerability. If Washington shifts policy, Canada feels it almost instantly. Tariffs, trade disputes, regulatory changes, all of it impacts Canadian businesses quickly. By deepening engagement with India, Canada sends a subtle message. We value our alliances, but we are building options. Not as an act of defiance, not as a dramatic break, but as smart strategy. For Canadian industries, this could open serious doors. Imagine Canadian energy firms gaining stable long-term contracts in South Asia. Imagine agricultural exporters reaching new middle-class consumers. Imagine tech startups forming research partnerships in one of the fastest-growing digital markets in the world. These are growth stories that can create jobs back home, but every opportunity comes with complexity. India has its own geopolitical balancing act. It maintains relationships with multiple global powers. It protects its national interests aggressively. Negotiations are never simple. Trade deals require patience, compromise, and long-term commitment. So the question becomes, is Canada ready for that level of strategic persistence? Another important angle is global perception. When markets see Canada actively expanding partnerships during global uncertainty, it builds an image of stability. Investors prefer countries that appear proactive, not reactive. Calm leadership during chaotic times builds confidence. Confidence attracts capital, and capital drives growth. However, there are voices who argue that moving too quickly toward emerging powers could create friction with traditional allies. Washington always watches closely when its closest partners deepen ties elsewhere. That does not mean conflict is inevitable, but it does mean diplomacy becomes more delicate. This is where tone matters. And if you noticed, the tone of the speech was balanced. Cooperative, calm, forward-looking. There were no dramatic declarations, no aggressive language. That is intentional. In geopolitics, style often reveals strategy. A steady voice suggests controlled positioning, not emotional reaction. For everyday Canadians, the most practical question is simple. Will this make life more affordable and secure? Diversified trade can stabilize prices over time. Broader partnerships can reduce vulnerability to single market shocks. Stronger global positioning can protect currency value. But these benefits do not appear overnight. They require consistent policy and follow-through. And this is where leadership credibility becomes crucial. One speech can spark headlines, but sustained action builds transformation. Agreements must turn into contracts. Conversations must turn into infrastructure. Promises must turn into measurable outcomes. Otherwise, it remains symbolic. On the Maple Doctrine, we focus on patterns, not moments. And the pattern suggests Canada is slowly preparing for a world where power is distributed, not centralized. A world where economic resilience matters more than political slogans. A world where middle powers must act intelligently to stay relevant. But here is something even more important. Public perception shapes political momentum. If Canadians see value in expanding global partnerships, leaders gain confidence to move further. If voters become skeptical or fearful, momentum slows. That is why conversations like this matter. Awareness creates informed opinion. Informed opinion influences direction. As we move toward the final part of this analysis, we need to explore the long-term consequences. Not just economic growth, but national identity. Not just diplomacy, but strategic independence. Because what we are witnessing may not be a single historic moment. It may be part of a gradual redefinition of Canada's global role. And the biggest question of all remains unanswered. Is Canada quietly stepping into a more independent global posture, or simply adapting carefully to survive in a tense world? In the final part, we will connect all these threads together and talk about what this could mean for the next 5 to 10 years, and why your voice as a viewer actually matters more than you might think. Now, let's bring everything together, because this is bigger than one speech, one visit, or one headline. What we may be witnessing is not a dramatic break from the past, but a slow and careful evolution of Canada's role in the world. For decades, Canada has operated within a very predictable global structure. Strong ties with the United States, close coordination with Western allies, a stable, rules-based order that felt permanent. But today, that order is shifting. Power is spreading. Regional alliances are strengthening. Economic competition is intensifying, and global crises are becoming more frequent. In this new environment, standing still is not neutral. Standing still is risky. When Canada engages more deeply with India during a period of global tension, it signals readiness for a multipolar world, a world where influence is shared, not dominated, a world where middle powers must build networks, not dependencies. But here's the critical point. Strategic independence does not mean abandoning alliances. It means strengthening your position within them. It means having options. It means entering every negotiation with confidence because you are not limited to one path. If Canada succeeds in expanding meaningful economic and diplomatic ties with India, the long-term benefits could be significant. Energy diversification could create stability during global disruptions. Agricultural exports could tap into expanding consumer markets. Technology collaboration could position Canadian innovation inside fast-growing ecosystems. Education exchanges could build long-term people-to-people connections that outlast political cycles. However, none of this is guaranteed. Success depends on consistency. It depends on follow-through. It depends on whether speeches turn into signed agreements, infrastructure investments, and measurable economic gains. There's also a domestic dimension that cannot be ignored. Canadian voters ultimately shape foreign policy direction. If the public supports diversified partnerships, leaders gain room to move boldly. If the public grows cautious or divided, momentum slows. That is why awareness matters. Understanding the stakes matters. And let's not forget the global audience. When other nations see Canada acting calmly and strategically during moments of international tension, it builds reputation. Reputation in geopolitics is currency. A country seen as stable, reliable, and forward-thinking becomes an attractive partner. That reputation attracts investment. It attracts cooperation. It attracts opportunity. At the same time, balance must be maintained. Relationships with the United States remain foundational. Economic integration runs deep. Cultural and security ties are strong. The challenge for Canada is not choosing one partner over another. The challenge is expanding without destabilizing, growing without provoking unnecessary friction, strengthening without appearing confrontational. This is a delicate dance, and that is why tone, timing, and location of speeches matter so much. India was not a random stop. The timing was not random. In geopolitics, context gives meaning. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, you see a country preparing for uncertainty, diversifying trade, engaging new markets, reinforcing old partnerships. This is not flashy politics. It is long-term positioning. It may not create instant dramatic headlines every week, but over 5 to 10 years, it can reshape economic resilience and global influence. For young Canadians thinking about careers, this could mean new international business opportunities. For entrepreneurs, it could mean new markets and partnerships. For investors, it could mean broader economic stability. For workers in energy, agriculture, or technology, it could mean expanded demand. But again, strategy only works when execution follows vision. That is why, on the Maple Doctrine, we do not just react to headlines. We track trajectories. We connect patterns. We ask where Canada is heading, not just where it stands today. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Canada should push harder to diversify its global partnerships, or should it focus more on strengthening traditional alliances? Is this strategic independence, or simply careful diplomacy? Your opinion matters more than you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a serious discussion, not just quick reactions. And if you found this breakdown valuable, share this video with someone who cares about Canada's future. Conversations like this grow when informed people pass them forward. If you've watched until the end, that tells me you care about understanding the deeper story. Make sure you to resubscribe to the Maple Doctrine so you don't miss what comes next. The world is changing fast, and Canada ES position within it will shape the opportunities and challenges we all face in the years ahead. This is not just about geopolitics. It is about the direction of our country. And the next chapter is already being written.